Welcome into the daily grind. We got Mark, and wait, that's not Luke. That's not Luke.
It's the new
Oh my
guy.
God, it's the new guy. We already praised Luke just a week into the. No, I'm just kidding. Luke is off today. I've got Daniel Greer from Grizzlies 901, our post game show right here at Bluff City Media. So, what's up, man?
What up? What up? So this morning, all right, I was in the gym doing my curls as I always do every Monday,
Obviously,
and I saw the bat signal come out, so I ran and I got here. And from my understanding, is that Luke had an issue this morning. His Pop-Tarts didn't pop just on time, and so little delay, and so that's why I'm here.
Absolutely. Well, it's it happens. It happens to the best of us. Sometimes you don't really get what you need right in the morning. And don't get your start to the day off right. So no, Luke is off today. Today it's all about obviously Steven Adams. We had some really brutal news yesterday come out on a beautiful Sunday. Just hanging out, getting ready for football, as you and I both do, as betting guys, setting lineups, getting those last fitting touches on our FanDuel, and what would you know? Some Steven Adams injury news comes out. He is having PCL injury or surgery. Come to find out, this has been a saga that's going on since, I guess, January. I think this is, I'm not going to sit in here and come here today and bash the front office, because I think it's been a lot of that over the last day and a half. I think anytime you want someone to go under the knife to go surgery, I think that's even as humans, as just regular non-basketball people, I think those are always your last. That's always your last effort, right? I mean, right. I know that I've seen a lot of hemming and hawing about, hindsight's 2020. You could have done this a long time ago, et cetera, et cetera. But they believe, and I believe, that they could have solved this with that. They really thought it was a strain, and they could have solved this with just rehabilitation. And obviously, if they didn't believe that, right, they would have had the surgery in February or whenever. So I think it's a little short-sighted in my mind to blame them and say, hey, we should have had the surgery in February, because again, they thought and they believed, and their doctors believed, that they could have solved this. They could have solved this problem with rehabilitation. And, he went out there and played in the first couple of preseason games. And clearly we all thought, well, he played the first preseason, and then, well, he's going to have another couple of preseasons to get on it, and he's just waiting for their opening season. And that wasn't it at all. Clearly his knee was not stable, and he did not feel good out there playing. So
I think that's what it comes down to is he wanted to. He could probably make it through majority of the season, if not the entire season. But really, what damage is he doing to himself? Like in the end, like his end goal, him as a human, what's he doing to himself? I think that's the issue. I think this is the smartest thing. It's probably something Adams didn't want to do. And obviously he said, I didn't want to have the surgery. But let's just go back to the very beginning when it all happened. This is a 9 to 12 month recovery. So yes, he could eventually play this season if he'd have done it right away. But honestly, like with a big man with a knee, I don't know if you just go ahead and just roll him out for the entire season anyway. And so this might be like, hey, this is like our backup plan. He's a big guy. Worst case, he's out for the next season. I think really, honestly, if he has the surgery back in January, February, whatever, I think he's still out for the entire season, because you can't take that chance on a big guy, especially with a guy who is still under contract, a guy who really needs his knees, because anybody over, that height, that weight really needs his knees. And so I think this is a safe approach. It sucks for the Grizzlies. It sucks for the fans. But in the end, I think this is going to be this would have been the call no matter what if you had surgery at any point.
Absolutely. I mean, that is the problem, right? I think that's what people have a problem with is they think, oh, you could have come back this year, right? In maybe December, January. I don't know.
Been tough.
But it'd been tough. It would have been absolutely tough. And like I said before, I mean, no one wants to get surgery on their knee unless you have to. Coming from someone who's had that thing, right? Who's had that done. Like, you don't want to do it unless you have to. And and that is the ultimate problem, is that, you think that over the course of whatever it was, 6 months from the time that happened to the to now, that would have been better, right? There would have been more stability in his knee. And, he goes out there and plays and goes out there in the playoffs, or excuse me, goes on in preseason, and that's clearly not the case.
Yeah.
And we can talk about, the Grizzlies not being forthcoming with news, and the Grizzlies, the front office not really letting us know. But they don't have to do that, right? I think people think that privileged to that information, right? That they are privileged to the Grizzlies front office and what they should and should not do, and what the injuries are timetable is all the time. Would I like to have more information? Sure, absolutely. I'd love to have more information because I am always curious about where their timeline is as well. I'd love to have more information about Brennan Clark right now. What's he doing? Like, I'm serious. I mean, I'd love to have that information. I'm not going to get it, but I understand, right? And it's not their prerogative to let us know what that is. And yeah, I think that was just always the idea is let's get to real basketball, real preseason basketball, and let's see where we're at after that. And they did. And the after that just really is shitty. Like, that's the problem. It's just a shitty situation, because the after that is where they got to is we're having surgery, and that's it for him.
And the worst part about all this, and this is on the front office, is there is no plan in place without Steven Adams. Like, this team is built around him because of the lack of rebounding in the certain positions and the depth of the center position, the depth of the big guy. We're turning to Kenny Lofton. And I know that's everybody's favorite, but this is probably the hot take of Grizz Twitter, or GrizzX, whatever you want to call it these days. Kenny Lofton isn't the answer for the big guy. And that's what sucks now, is like we're turning to Kenny Lofton. So it's like one side of Grizz Twitter is like, hey, Kenny Lofton has to get minutes. Okay, well, that could actually happen. But the other side, they're saying we have to have more depth in the big guy. Listen, you can't have both, because there's not room for two guys in this one position. And so I think that I love Lofton. I wish we would have drafted him. Obviously, we end up getting him undrafted, but realistically, I don't think Kenny Lofton's the answer. But if we want to go small ball, we have to figure out a way to rebound. And I think that's going to be the issue in the end. But man, we might be able to score a lot. We might be able to go a little bit faster on offense, but we got to figure out how to rebound.
Well, I mean, I will say this: the Grizzlies were not as bad a rebounding team as you might think. Postseason, post All-Star break last year, they were 13th in the league, so average, right? Very average. Where it really hurts you is at offensive rebounding. Steven Adams offensive rebounding at a 17% clip, right? Which is no one else does that in the NBA, not any other center. And so you're not replacing that. That's number one. He rebounds the ball at a defensive rebounding rate at 22%. Also, no one else does that in the NBA. You're not replacing that either. And that's the ultimate issue. Like you said, the roster construction of having more depth at that position. And that is where you can put blame on the front office and say, hey, this is where we fucked up here. Like, this is it right here, because we have nothing else. And Kenny Lofton Jr. is not it. He's not the answer. He's not good. He's just not. He's not good. I mean, like that's just the reality of the situation. He's not good. And so even aside from Steven Adams not being heard, Kenny Lofton is not your answer to the big rotation. And like you said, the rebounding really hurts. So they have got to figure out a way. Obviously, X is going to start, but the backside of that rotation is really where you miss the most. And I've seen a lot of people like forgetting about X. So we need to go fill out Steven Adams. He's the one stepping into the role right away. Period. End of story. In terms of a starting position, I agree. You really have to. I mean, right now you got to figure out a way to round out the backside of the rotation. Right. We're going to talk about some ideas what they can do to fix the rotation on the front end. But right now, coming up on Wednesday night, I mean, like coming up real quick. X is the guy, and you got to figure out the back of the rotation. And we've seen the preseason. I mean, those two games where they rotate, the rotation was with Kenny Lofton Jr. and Jaren out there. It was awful. It was not a good rotation. I mean, you're trying to play 4 out with 5 guys who none of them want to be the center. Like, you know what I mean? So, again, trying to find someone to replace Steven Adams is going to be very, very difficult. Even if you go out into the trade market, even go out into free agency, which is a barren landscape, like any of those things, because you're talking about a guy who does so many things really well. I mean, screens the ball. I mean, he's a great passer, rebounds the ball at a really, really high level, blocks shots. I mean, it's not just a let's go and replace him. It's a situation where it's very hard to find that replacement, right? And that is the difficult answer for Steve Adams. And I mean, I will be real honest. I'm not so sure we haven't seen the last of Steven Adams. I mean, that is a tough injury to come back from. I don't know what he looks like on the backside of this injury. I don't know what and that's the probably the scarier thought for me is a year from now. What is Steven Adams at post surgery? Have we even thought about that? Probably not.
Let's not think about that. That'd be the thought process I'd like to not go down, is thinking about that. But listen, I want to say one thing about the Jaren and Junior deal. I agree with you that it didn't look good, but I also can look at it and say, hey, it sucked. It didn't look good, but it's also the first time they probably have went with it into a real game. I'm not saying in practice. And so I'm going to go on the other side of that and say, hey, I think that's the solution eventually, because I just think you have to figure out your roles. And I think you have to say, hey, Junior, you had to be more of the center position, work the post a little bit, and then switch out, right? So you can switch out with Jaren. And so you run out, Jaren runs in a sense. It's almost like a fluid style offense. And I think that could work because Junior could be a replacement, but he has to be in certain situations for certain type of teams that they're going against. He is matchup based 100%, but I do think that he is a solution because he can score. And if he can figure out a way to rebound just a little bit better and not be completely horrendous on defense, then I think we're okay, because Jaren can make up for his mistakes, but they're going to have to play a lot more games to be able to figure out whatever that chemistry is.
Being not completely horrendous on defense, low bar to clear.
Low.
Very low bar to clear. I love it. All right, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back. We're going to talk about the Grizzlies options and where they go from here on the other side.
I am highly upset, man.
Oh, man.
ESPN, you dastardly dogs you. Last week had us feeling good. They picked the Grizzlies to be first in the West with about 48.5 wins. And what a difference a few days makes.
What a difference.
You put out your list of the top 100 players in the NBA. Desmond Bain jumps in at 61. Jaren Jackson Jr. comes in at number 31. Jaren's top 25 to me, but if you, all right, whatever. I think that's a little slight to Jaren. Desmond Bain is disgusting, in my opinion. Then we get Ja Morant, All-NBA player, two-time All-Star, one of the most dynamic offensively players in the NBA, Ja Morant. That guy was number 35 on their list. Kenny Stubblefield, the same people that said the Grizzlies will be the first team in the West, they're going to get that done with just some regular dudes.
Tune in to the Anthony Sane Show, Wednesdays and Fridays at 12 p.m. weekly on the Bluff City Media YouTube channel.
Just curious, you kind of talked about the transfers and things like that. How has that changed your mindset from a roster management standpoint? Like, incredible recruiter. All the classes, I think we had 2 back-to-back and 21 and 22 top classes. How does that change with the transfer portal? Do you start focusing more on upperclassmen? Do you kind of get away from the younger freshmen? How does that work?
Yeah, so I still believe in our coaching staff, the way we do things, and developing guys. And that I will never get away from that philosophy. We're still going to recruit a high school class. Now, there's a lot of colleges out there that say, screw this. We're pushing all the chips in on this roster, win right now, and we'll figure it out. Sure. And if it doesn't, right, it implodes and bad things happen. But I think you still have to bring in true freshmen and develop them and see what they can become. And that I'll never waver from that. But the portal certainly changed things.
Tune in to Tigers Untapped with TJ Willis and Trey Lasley every Wednesday at 3 p.m. on the Bluff City Media YouTube channel.
Welcome back to the Daily Grind. My name is Mark. As always, I'm here every day, but today, Daniel Greer from Grizz 901 post-game show right here at Bluff City Media. This is the time of the show where I do shameless plugs. And if you're not already a Bluff City Media Insider, make sure you do so. It's super easy, super affordable. If you sign up for a whole year, you get a free shirt, but it's $5 a month. It's not the price of this coffee because I made this coffee. So it's not that, but
is it even the price? Is it a price of a Starbucks coffee anymore? Like,
not anymore. It's
not
too
anymore.
cheap.
Yeah.
It's a great deal, and it really supports us. It lets us do these shows that we bring to you right here on Bluff City Media. And if you can't do that, do something free. Just go subscribe to the YouTube channel. We crossed over 2,000 subscribers over the weekend. Flew right by it. We're looking for 2,500 now. We're at like 2018 or something like that. So if you can't do an insider subscription, make sure you go do the next best thing. Go subscribe to the YouTube channel. So let's talk about the options that the Grizzlies have for Steven Adams. I'm going to tell you the options, and then we're going to tell you exactly what they're going to do, because while they're all options, they're not. None of these are going to happen.
Is this going to be the fastest segment? This one right here.
This fastest segment. All right. So number one, they can file a disabled player exception. This is something that you get if you have a long-term injury. You get it's half of the salary, 50% of the salary currently for whatever player it is. Steven Adams is like 12.5 million. I think this is like 6.2 million. And the sticking point with that is you got to have a roster spot. So that's the big thing, is you got to have a roster spot, and you can't just sign somebody and be over the roster limit. And also once that player comes back, that exception goes away. Now, in this case, it would be a whole year, so it wouldn't be that big a deal. Yeah. Then the Grizzlies can also sign a free agent with the biannual exception or mid-level exception, because they have not used either of those this year. Again, also need a roster spot for this. And so they still have the biannual is 7.5 and the mid-level is 12.4. So also options. The Grizzlies can also just sign a free agent outright. They got room under the luxury tax. Again, still need a roster spot. And the last option, which is the option they're going to do, is there's this thing called the suspended exemption list. And so when you have a suspended player, you can sign a player to replace that person. And this does not cost you a roster spot, because it's basically, think about it like an inactive list or injured reserve in the NFL. It's essentially that, but it's a suspended exemption list. And so you sign a player, and that player is available to you until that player is unsuspended. So this would be John Morant. So starting 5 days after the season, I think it's the 2nd of November.
After the fifth game.
After the fifth game. That's right. Fifth game, which in this case for us is next week.
11-2. Yeah.
11-2. You can sign a player. You can basically take a look at that player all while John Morant's suspended. And once John Morant comes back for suspension as on the active list, that player has to leave, or you can use any of those other options we talked about to sign that player long term. So that is what they will do. They won't do anything else other than that. And that is the short-term option for the Grizzlies. It's a way for them to take a look at any free agents they have without any kind of long-term commitment, as well as see what that person looks like inside their system.
Right. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else going to happen. I think that's self-explanatory. The conservative approach from the front office has shown their true colors. And so we know that's kind of the route they're going to take. Now, I wouldn't say that's the end goal for the entire season.
No,
I think this is
not the entire season. This is the short-term option. What do we do right now? Again, we're talking about starting a game on Wednesday. That's what we're talking about.
Yes.
What do we do for that? What do we do for the games until Ja comes back, kind of thing?
Yeah. So honestly, the first 5 games, this is the roster. Nothing will change. There's nobody that's going to get waived, because all 15 contracts that the Grizzlies have are guaranteed. So they honestly are letting go of that player on waivers and just saying, sayonara, we're going to pay you, but we're going to have to make the roster spot up. That doesn't make sense. There's nobody out there that's good enough for that. The only way that they would do anything is a trade. And I think the trade would have to come down probably before Wednesday. I don't see that happening unless there's a friend in another, I guess, franchise organization that is close with Zach Kleiman and says, hey, let's make this swap because it's the best interest for both of our teams. That could happen, honestly, but very, very little chance that actually happens.
Unlikely. Very unlikely that happens. Again, I would almost go and say that's just not going to happen. I can almost guarantee you. The other thing now on the other side of this is the other question is who do they sign? And I want to say this, that ain't a whole lot of people out there to sign, because if they were good, they'd be on the team.
They'd be signed. Yeah,
they'd be signed. That's the problem when you get to free agents, in this part of the year. You get to free agents and when you get to 10 days in the later part of the year where people have had a kind of like, hey, it didn't work out with the system, the franchise, whatever, you get a little more flexibility, a lot more guys, a little bit more names available. Right now, Bismack Biyombo is probably your best in terms of like, hey, what do you need him to do? Just rebound the ball.
Correct.
That's probably your best guy that's not signed right now. He's got a lot of experience. Again, can just all we need you to is be big, right?
Yeah.
Be big and rebound the ball right now, just as a temporary solution. I know Nerlens Noel is out there too. If anybody says Boogie Cousins, we will block you.
He's slow. He's so slow.
He was slow back. He was slow
Yeah.
when he was in the league.
Yeah.
I think I'll see people say Dwight Howard. Please no. The most logical candidate, probably Bismack Biyombo. In terms of like free agent, need to be big, need to rebound the ball. I don't know of anybody else that I think would even. I don't know.
Yeah, so Gorgie Jang was in this. He was in Memphis, right? And so he was there for a while.
Yeah.
He really did the Steven Adams role in a sense because he was a Band-Aid type player for 20 games. I think you can take a run and look at him at least. John Butler, I still think he's too small. Tony Bradley's too small. Kim Burke's too small. I really do think it comes down to a Bismack Biyombo, Dwayne Dedmon, Gorgie Jang, even Derek Favors I would be okay with. Like you're looking at a guy who can just rebound the ball and kind of allow them to be, I guess, okay on rebounding and kind of give Jaren a break because this is all falling back on Jaren in a sense of, hey, you have to be a better rebounder. And then really it could be just hey, we're going to play this player when we're playing a big team, we're playing a small team, we're going to go with a junior. I think you can have that. And I think that actually allows you to be versatile again because Adams and Brandon Clark were so different, but they allowed you to be versatile and allowed the other players to be who their true selves are. When you take out a guy like Adams, it doesn't allow Jaren to be his true self. When you put in Junior with actually Jaren, it doesn't allow him to be his true self. You have to have a guy that's bigger that takes on those big matchups. And so I think if you get somebody, it's a guy who can be for matchup based. And that's for a big team, you bring in the big guy. If it's a smaller team, you go smaller with an Aldama, with Junior, Jaren, and then you can have X still there, right? But you also can go smaller. I think it's completely matchup based for the first 20 games after the 5th game.
And I think that's the ultimate issue with people say, well, Jaren, just slide Jaren to the 2 because that doesn't let Jaren do what he does best, right? Jaren is a great perimeter defender. He's great just roaming off ball. He's excellent off the ball, coming and blocking shots. Like those are the things that again, like you said, when Steven Adams was here, allowed Jaren to be as good as he was.
Yep.
And so I think that is the ultimate issue with like, hey, let's just play Jaren at center is that you lose so much of the other part of Jaren. When I'm going to put you back in the paint. I need you to rebound the ball. You lose so much of what he makes him extremely good on defense. And so that is the ultimate issue. Let's take one more quick break. Let's come back and we're going to talk about our trade targets for the Grizzlies and what they should do in terms of going out and getting one more player.
Seth Hennigan just still, he
doesn't look himself.
He just doesn't, in the big moments, he's not making the plays that have to be made. If you look at the raw stats, they're not terrible. But the 2 interceptions, and he fumbled twice. They didn't lose those fumbles, but 2 fumbles and 2 interceptions. One of them coming at a terrible time on a 4th down late in the game when Memphis really needed to put points on the board. But I just don't think Seth is playing well enough to elevate this team.
Right.
I think he's playing well enough for Memphis to be fine. But as far as for them to do something special and to elevate this team, he's just not playing like that.
Tune in to On the Bluff with Christian Fowler and Gabe Kuhn every Tuesday at 12 p.m. on the Bluff City Media YouTube channel.
Kenny, there are certain guys in the NBA that are enigmatic players. They're going to be appealing to a large fan base. But when you have guys like that who, like John Morant, who have off-court issues he's had, Kyrie Irving has had the things he's had, the NBA doesn't particularly like the fact that those guys are larger than life. If I'm the NBA, if I'm ESPN, who of course are working together on all this stuff, I'm going to start telling you who you need to like. And it's going to be a different type of guy to kind of play off of the guys that are going to be there anyway. Let me put these squeaky clean image guys that we want to put in front of you up there as well to kind of counteract some of the stuff we get with the guys that we don't have any control out of. So let me put the Tyrese Halliburtons in front of you. Let me put the Shai Gilgeous-Alexanders in front of you, the Josh Giddys. Let me force these guys in front of you, not particularly on national television games, but let me just kind of create these little sub agendas with these guys to kind of make them the those second tier stars that we're gonna like put out in front as well. Like they're doing this on purpose, man. Like if anybody can't see this, like come on, man. Do not sit there and tell me that you really think that Tyrese Halliburton is a top 20 player in the NBA.
Tune in to the Anthony Sane Show Wednesdays and Fridays at 12 p.m. weekly on the Bluff City Media YouTube channel.
Welcome back to the Daily Grind. Mark King and Dana Greer right here on the show today. And a shameless plug for both of our shows. Bluff City Bets. Football on Thursdays, betting on Fridays. My show on Thursdays, your show on Fridays. So very shameless plug for us. But make sure you go check it out. Brought to you guys by our friends at Zen Sports.
I have 3 bets in our Discord channel right now. And they're 1, former Grizzly, 2, Grizzlies for opening day on the 25th.
Go check them out. Well, actually, if you're not an insider, you won't have access to our Discord. So just another reason to be an insider right here at Bluff City Media. Let's continue on to everybody's favorite segment. And this is where we talk trade targets. And before we get into this, I want to say one thing to be very clear. None of these are happening. I just want to make sure that people know that none of these are happening anytime soon. I know I've seen some people on the Twitter verse be very, or X, what do you want to call it? You know, I'm going to call it Twitter because that's what I'm going to do. You can't make me change, Elon. I've seen a lot of people be upset about, we have wasted a spot with Kenny Lofton Jr. in the 15th spot. We wasted a spot signing him, whatever. Do you know how easy it is to get rid of Kenny Lofton Jr. to make a spot? You can just waive him and that's it. Like you can just dead money, like whatever. I mean, this is easy. I mean, if you really wanted to get rid of Steven Adams, you could waive him and use a stress provision over 3 years, and it still not matter. So, like, they have plenty of flexibility on their roster, especially the back end of it. The contracts are so small; these things don't matter. They can waive them, cut them, whatever. So keep that in mind as we're talking about this. I will also say that any of these trade targets, the most likely candidate to be sent out, and some of them is going to be Brandon Clark. That would be my assumption, is that that's what people will want. They're not going to want, it's not going to be a Steve Adams for whomever, right? It's not going to be that. It's going to be what the most upside is. And that's most likely Brandon Clark and a first, Brandon Clark and 2 first, things like that. So let's get into the names. I'm going to put these that I have put in there on my favorite to, this is going from favorite to least favorite. First up, it's Clint Capella. I don't think he's a gettable guy. I wanted to include his name because I think he's the most like Steven Adams. Like if you want to look and replace him, this is the most like Steven Adams. I don't think he is a guy you can get because he's the starter and it just would take a lot. I think it would take, I think you're looking at Brandon Clark plus 2 first, maybe a player because you got to match contracts. He's got a $20 million contract. So, you got to do some maneuvering there. So it's going to take Brandon Clark plus a peripheral player, maybe Kenny Lofton Jr., things like that, to make the salaries match. I don't see any reason why the Hawks do this, but I think he's the most like Steven Adams. If you're looking to just replace him, he's the person I think was most like that person you're trying to replace. So I don't want to spend a whole lot of time talking just because I just don't know if it's a really like, hey, this is what's going to happen. Thoughts?
I don't think we're getting Clint Capella. I think he's a good spot. Yeah, I don't think we are.
Yeah. Zubac and the Clippers organization. I think he is very good.
Yes.
He is very good. He is a career double-digit rebounder right at 10 rebounds a game. And does a lot. Again, we're talking about these 2 guys, I think, are the most, Clint Capella and Ivica Zubac are the most like Steven Adams. I actually think Zubac would be gettable, but I don't think that. Here's the thing about trades I want to say before we get too far. It's not just, hey, can we give up the trade, right? There's a whole other side of this. Why does that organization do it, right? You have to look, and that's what you got to look at from both sides is why do the Clippers even do this? What does it matter for them? Because you're looking at, hey, well, the most likely candidate is Brandon Clark, who does nothing for them this year.
No.
And they're looking to compete, right? They're looking for compete. They're going to be a good team. So I think he's gettable, but I just don't think the Clippers have any real reason to do this.
Yeah.
Maybe. I think if it may be if you get into the trade deadline and they're not as good as they thought they were.
Right. And that honestly has to be the only way. That's the only route that they take, because they do have Mason Plumlee there as their backup. They do like him a lot. He is a big guy. He does a little bit of what Zubac doesn't, but also like for their team, they have to have the interchangeable bigs, the one that they can go a little bit more flexible, a little more finesse team, and then the other guy that wants to bang. And Zubac is great. I would love to have him. He is a trade deadline guy that you're going to get if they want to blow it up. At that point, that opens up so many. If the Clippers blow up, that means there's so much that's going to happen around the league that actually benefits you. You have to have one of these big teams blow up to really get a guy that you can be a facilitator in a trade. And I think this is the only route that you can go in getting a guy like Zubac.
Yeah. Again, and these are guys that we're all talking about long term here, right? This is not a replacement for Steven Adams right now. This is a replacement for Steven Adams for good. This is no Steven Adams doesn't exist on this team anymore, kind of thing. Next guy on the list, Robert Williams III. Plays for Portland now, was the Celtics. Before that, Portland just traded Dame. I mean, I think he's the first realistic candidate. I think he's the first guy that I think, you got to you could maybe make that trade in November, right? And I think they might do it because Portland's not good. They don't want to be good. I mean, but they're not going to be good. They're trading away Dame. That is a white flag. That is, hey, we're no longer doing this, right? You take someone off their team who is good, and you give them Brennan Clark, who isn't going to play, so that makes them worse, right? In terms of just the tankathon, and you give them a pick, maybe a first and a second to cover their for their troubles. Yeah. So I think that he is the first. I mean, if it were me, he's a first call I make. I think because 100%. I think he's gettable, and I think he's still young. He's still got 3 years left on his contract after this year. Right what Steven was making $12 million a year. I think he's the best version of. Is he available? Is he gettable? And is he good?
I think with this is because you do have a little bit more you can take on. I still think that there is a way to make this happen within the trade exception. All of this that could happen. I'm not privy to know the ins and outs of how in the world this trade would work, but I know you do have trade exceptions that can go into that. So if you were to able to throw them a young up and coming guy who you believe in, but hasn't really hit their ceiling yet, and they have the potential to let them kind of, still work a little bit, still cook. And so like a guy like Jake LaRavia, it would be a potential guy in this trade and send him out and with picks and bring back the Time Lord. I think that is the solution. And I think that is the first call I would have made. And I guarantee that this call has already been made because there's no way you can play the Time Lord next to DeAndre Ayton. Ayton needs to be their main guy with Portland. And so I think Robert Williams is the guy who you can bring over. And so I think if anything, that is the solution long-term. And worst case, that actually gives you Steven Adams and Robert Williams on the same team. With Steven Adams getting older, as he's not old, he's getting older in his time in his career, it allows him to move into a bench role. You're talking about bringing Steven Adams off the bench in the future with 1 year left on his. Yeah, I think this is the smart decision you would go with if you were going after Robert Williams.
Yeah, his contract, not a big contract, 11.5. And so you mentioned the traded player exception. If for those of you who don't know, the TP is created when you send out a large contract and don't take a bunch in return. And so it's a way to keep your flexibility in the future. So what that does is the Grizzlies can send out a lower, say if they wanted to trade for Robert Williams, they could send out a lower value contract and not have to match salaries in return. They could use that traded player exception, which is $7.2 million. It was created from the Dylan Brooks sign and trade, and they can take that 7.2 and use that as basically a salary match as people coming back. So they don't have to send out exactly 11.5 million for this trade. They could send out half of that. And if they found some reason, if Portland was dumb enough to take 2 first and not trade Brennan Clark at all and just say, hey, I'll trade you Jake LaRavia and Kenny Lofton, then great. Then that's awesome. But I don't think that's happening, but that's how it would work. Next person on my list, Wendell Carter Jr. I actually really like Wendell Carter Jr. Still on he's on a second contract in the NBA, 13 million, kind of the same same baseline as Rob Williams. Actually, a descending contract. That I look at it, it goes down to 10.8. He's got 3 more years left, including this year on his deal. So this year plus 2, and then he's unrestricted. But I think a guy that, again, kind of checks those boxes. Is he gettable? Is he good enough? And does he kind of fit your time? Like, those are the things that I'm looking at. And would Orlando do that? I don't know if Orlando does it. I think that's the last box. I don't know if they're unwilling to check. But Orlando's like a dumb franchise. Like, they do dumb shit all the time. Maybe you can pull on over on them. They do dumb shit all the time. So
yeah,
I would start though. Again, like you said, I think these calls have already all been made. I mean, at least they've already had some preliminary discussions with a lot of these teams. So and if their traction, but again, like we mentioned already in the previous segment, their goal is going to be, hey, let's see what we can do for the short term, and then we'll worry about trading at the end of, at the beginning of December, maybe January.
Well, one thing I will say, and I have a prop for this one, is I dare you to trade us Wendell Clark, and I'll show you why. Let's see, little Dookie. Listen, I'm Dookie through and through. People know that. And that's probably unfortunately for myself, but also unfortunately for some other people that have to listen to me. But I am a huge Wendell Carter guy, and a little bit to our Bluff City bets. Take him against the Bulls whenever they play. I don't know why, but he just kills them. But anyway, yes, Wendell Carter on this team would allow Jaren to be Jaren. And he does have the short post game, and he has that old man's game. And so I like Wendell Carter, can hit a 3 or 2 threes a game. And so he's a guy who can stretch you enough, but he's also a guy who's willing to bang. And you want to have a guy that is you're big, that's willing to do the dirty work.
Yeah, he averages career last year was 8.7 rebounds. The year before that, 10.5. But again, probably the best, maybe one of the best besides the next guy, one of the better 3-point shooters on our list. His career 32% for 3-point shooter, which again, that sounds not a lot, but for big guy, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Last year he shot it at 35% clip, so very, very good last year. Has shown being able to shoot that at a pretty good clip, 35%, which is again just as good as some guards, and you'd want some guards to do that. So I love Wendell Carter. I think he would be very, very good on this team. Next up on our list, I think is, again, second to last person on the list and gets a little more easier and gettable, Kelly Olynyk. And I think he is also an expiring contract. He is now the backup big there. I think this is what I would refer. He is a Band-Aid. He is not a long-term solution here at the Grizzlies. He's an older guy, but he's, again, expiring. So if you would say, hey, we are really going to compete this year, you can go out and get him for much less than you'd be able to get Robert Williams and some of those other guys. You're not having to give up a lot of stuff to get him. I mean, again, maybe this is where the traded player position comes in. You trade maybe maybe that's a Jake Laravia in a second to get Kelly Olynyk over here. Maybe a little bit more. But I don't think you got to give it first. Maybe it's a couple of young players, and you take back his contract because it's expiring as well. Depends how good the Jazz are this year. But if it's a Band-Aid situation for the Grizzlies and you need someone for the playoffs, you could do worse. Yeah.
No, listen, the expiring contract is music to my ears with a player like this. He's like those Band-Aids that you get that are off-brand, that you get and they're the Equate, whatever they are, whatever brand they are. You get them. They don't stick very well, but they do the job. Like, he is that kind of guy. He's an Equate Band-Aid. Did you even say, is that the name of the brand? Equate? Maybe?
But I think that is the name, like Kroger brand, whatever. Kroger brand, Kelly Olynyk. So, all right. Last person on the list, Mitchell Robinson over at the Knicks. He should have been a little higher, but he does one thing well. You know what that one thing is?
Rebound.
He rebounds the ball. He is got 3 years left on his contract this year plus 2. And so is still a younger guy, but he rebounds the ball really well. And yes, he is a fraction of what Steven Adams was. He doesn't do a whole lot of other things really well. He doesn't shoot the ball from 3 at all. Doesn't even do it well. He doesn't do it well. He doesn't do it all. I actually would probably, if I had to classify him, I would classify him as a a slightly better Xavier Tillman.
Mm.
Is what I think I would classify him as.
Slightly better.
Yeah, I mean, he is a Xavier Tillman in that same vein of player, but I'm going to say he is better, not slightly. He's better.
He's better.
But it's the same idea, right? Like
Yes.
he doesn't do a lot of things, but he does some things. The things he does really well.
Yeah.
And he's a big body, and I don't know what you would get in terms of, hey, what does he allow Jaren to do? Like we talked about.
Yeah.
But I think he's an option, and I don't think I think the Knicks would be able to, because they have quite a plethora of bigs. They got a lot of guys they could work around and not miss him and still get some assets for him. So I think he's gettable, and that's one of why I put him on the list. I think he checks the box of, is he gettable? Of like, would it be likely to happen? I think it could happen.
Yeah. Listen, Mitchell Robinson would be great on this team. He fills the Steven Adams role probably the best out of everybody on this, because he is a good screen setter. He is a good rebounder, a great rebounder, actually. He does block shots enough. And so I think if you're looking for a square peg and a square hole, like square, whatever, can you call it a hole if it's not a circle? But anyway, I think you can have the Mitchell Robinson be that. But let me give you my guy. That's the opposite, right, which is on the same team. And that's Isaiah Hartenstein.
Yeah.
Like, he's the exact same player. He plays behind Mitchell Robinson. $9 million on his contract this season. He's an unrestricted free agent next year. You're talking about the backup. So I think the Knicks, just in this conversation, are teams that they should target, because, hey, we do have something we can offer you. I don't know who else is on their team that's big, if you're saying that they're pretty deep in that area. But I will say that Hartenstein does fill that role. He is on an expiring contract, so realistically, you bring him over, you throw them a Jake LaRavia and your trade exemption, and that easily fits whatever picks we need to figure out. My thing is, you have a guy who can be here for the long term. The problem is if he does play well, you want to keep him. Unfortunately, you're about to pay so many guys. It's going to be hard to keep him for the long term, but he'd be a great 1-year deal with hopes that you can keep him around.
Yeah, I like Isaiah Hartenstein too. Like, and you bring up a lot of good points. The reason I put Mitchell Robinson over here and ahead of him was because of the contract situation. If you can get the contract locked up for the next couple of years, you basically kick the can down the road a little bit. But you brought up a good point that the Grizzlies have created or have collected assets for quite some time in terms of picks, and they've got a lot of young players, some who are good, some who are not. Looking at you, Jake LaRavia. And so, John Conchar, these guys they're not good at basketball, right? They're just, and maybe you can trick another team into taking those players and be like, oh no, they're really good. Like, show them like the good, like game film where John Conchar had that 17 points, that one game. Right. And maybe you can just show them that and nothing else. And maybe they'll take them. This just became a John Conchar hates. I'm sorry. I'll stop. But anyway, no, that's the point. Like the Grizzlies have assets, and now, we talked about over the summer was the time to use them. Now is really the time to use them. And unfortunately, like we mentioned in the first segment, you've done such a poor job of roster construction on this team in terms of just depth, and they missed on some draft picks, like we talked about. Again, I'm not trying to bash on Jake LaRavia and Kenny Lofton and John Conchar. Jake LaRavia and Kenny Lofton, Jake LaRavia especially, they just missed. And that's okay. Like, there's nothing wrong with missing on draft picks, because those picks in the 20s and 30s, those are, and especially undrafted, like a lot of times they just don't pan out. There's like nothing wrong with that at all. So like, that's okay. But they've gotten us to a point now where instead of using those assets to go get another wing, which they think they've solved with the idea of Marcus Smart and pushing people over. But now you've got to go use those assets to get a big, and to get a young big, long-term big that can be beside Steven Adams. So
I think that's important. I don't think the roster construction is terrible. They are deep enough. The problem is they've gotten depleted in their bigs. Two guys real quick. And talking about Jitty, I think a guy that can go in a trade to go get this guy, and that's Andre Drummond with the Bulls. He's their backup. He makes roughly $3 million a year. Jitty's making 2-ish. He does have a longer term contract. Maybe he fits that Alex Caruso type player that they like over there in Chicago. I think he could be a guy who could go over there. And I'm not the guy who is all about trading people or trading Jitty. I do like Jitty. I think he does have a good spot. I just think that we've gotten a little bit better than we've been. I think he fits the grit and grind era better than he does right now, the Grizz next gen, whatever they are. And so I would say getting a guy like Andre Drummond, who can be a very good rebounder, that knows his role, doesn't need to do anything extra, doesn't need to play at the end of the game because you don't need to go so big at the end of the game. I think you can actually slide in a Aldama, whoever, to be a closing lineup. But I think a guy who can help Jaren, kind of just as you go throughout the regular season in the game, I think that's a guy with Andre Drummond. Let me go to my next guy because I don't think there's any reason we need to spend more time on him. And that is, I'm looking at Detroit. They have too many bigs, right? They just traded and got Jalen Duren, who actually, I think he got injured this last game. So this might have to hesitate on an early trade. But I think a trade eventually throughout the year, Marvin Bagley, and also, who else did I say? James Wiseman. Sorry, lost train of thought. I think both those guys are gettable. James Wiseman is actually on an expiring contract. And so I think you can go get a James Wiseman. He's only making 12. And so I think you can find a way to send them like a Jake LaRavia, John Contra, whoever, with a trade exemption, and you're good to go. So I think those guys fit your team, and they're not long-term, but I think they are guys that can fill that role enough, especially for the short term of this year, and then see if they're good enough to keep them around next year.
Yeah, I think I didn't put Andre Drummond on the list, but I think that's a good guy that, again, the deal could be done fairly easily, for fairly low. It's a low risk move, right? It's an expiring deal. It's a low deal. If you need to cut him, waive him, all that kind of stuff, you can still go. That's a really good a guy that they should definitely take a look at and definitely should make a phone call about. So we went way long today. Obviously there's a lot of big news, and these trade targets are hard to get there, but I'll be back tomorrow. Daniel will not. Luke will be back tomorrow. Hopefully, we can all hope. But again, this is the daily grind. If you're not already Bluff City Media Insider, subscribe and do so. If you're not already subscribed to the YouTube channel, make sure you do so. Go and look at all the channels and shows we got for you guys. I promise there is something for everybody. And that's the beauty of Bluff City Media, is that we have a lot of shows, a lot of different personalities, a lot of different people on the shows. And so I promise you'll find something that you like. It may not be this show, but I promise you it'll be another show. We will see you guys tomorrow.